in the book of Genesis, chapter 18, Abraham interacts with God. The text is clear. He's dialoguing with God. And yet, Moses also is careful to write that what appeared to Abraham was three men, right? Two of them turn out to be angels that go on to Sodom and Gomorrah, but one of them stays behind and talks with Abraham, and that's God. So it's there's even this controversial discussion about how that Moses, that Abraham stood standing before God, and how that's unacceptable in Middle Eastern posture, right? You don't stand before the person who's of higher rank than you. You stand before that person doesn't stand before you, or something like that. Yet Moses, I mean, the Masoretes swapped the text around. They changed the Hebrew because it was so controversial that Abraham, a mere human, was standing before God, or God was standing before Abraham. In other words, the higher rank is supposed to be sitting, the king, and the subject is supposed to be standing before God, the one who's sitting. But the text has it opposite. And the point I'm bringing up is that it was really God. It wasn't just another angel. That's the reason why I went into all those details. So our God is complex. To behold Yeshua is to behold God, to behold the face of God, because we can't see God. And yet to look at Yeshua is to look at the Son, not the Father. There's two separate persons. In segment 5, we looked at our God is complex, and we just continue to talk about how that Trinity introduces the discussion about the idea that when we're trying to ascertain the identity of God from the essence point of view, from his essential nature, we have this discussion known as ontological Trinity. Ontological Trinity. I'll flash a little graphic that's used to using on the screen. Ontology is the branch of metaphysics that deals with the natures of beings. How can God be three? Right? That's what we're talking about when we're talking about identity and the nature of is. Ontology is that branch. But we also talk about how that God is economically a Trinity, in that there are three persons, and in salvation history, the three persons play their different roles, and there's even subordination within the economic Trinity. God the Father begets God the Son, or the Son of God. The Son is eternally begotten by the Father, not in temporal sense like humans beget one another, like we give birth to each other. Rather, it's an eternal begetting that simply describes their relationship to one another from father to son, but it's eternal nevertheless. There was never a time that the Father was not the Father, and there was never a time when the Son was not the Son. That's eternal begetting. Nevertheless, that's their relationship. Ontologically, the Father eternally begets the Son, and the Son does that which is pleasing to the Father and is subservient to the Father in that role. Likewise, the Spirit is spirated. He's sent, eternally sent by the Father and the Son in this role of love, this expression of confirming the words of the Son, and demonstrating the unity that is necessary for all believers to have, not just with the Son, but with the Father as well. And so we're talking about the complexity of God in both the ontological Trinity view and the economic Trinity view. These aren't competing perspectives. These actually are two sides of one coin. And so it's necessary when we're having discussions with non-Trinitarians that we differentiate between when we're saying that subject is something like Jesus is God, or Yahweh is God, or the Holy Spirit is God. There are different ways to express this statement of is, and I'll flash a little graphic on the screen for this as well. The identity statement of the is, the verb, the copula. Jesus is God. Are we saying that that's a statement of, is that an is of identity, or is that an is of predication? Right? Is it a statement of identity, or is it a statement of predication? I'll flash a little example on the screen, but suffice to say that someone is, when we say identity, then we're using two different nouns or titles, but we're describing the same person. Like, for instance, Marilyn Monroe's real name is not Marilyn Monroe. It's a different name. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'll flash it on the screen so you can see. Likewise, for instance, who's that famous writer? Mark Twain. His real name isn't Mark Twain. It's something else, his birth name. So if I were to say that Marilyn Monroe is, and then I were to say her real name, this is a statement of identity, right? Because the title on either side of the is the same. It's the same, one and the same person. Mark Twain is so-and-so, whatever his real name is. Same thing. I'll put it on the screen because I can't remember off the top of my head. That's a statement of identity. But if I say Marilyn Monroe is an actress, well, that's a little different. That's a statement of predication. So Jesus is God. Is that a statement of identity or a statement of predication? We'll talk about that a little bit later. But that's what we're dealing with when we're dealing with the is and identity. That's something that people like Dr. Dale Tuggy in his philosophical mindset love to discuss, but it's necessary for we ordinary Christians to kind of be aware of, because otherwise we end up expressing models of Trinity that aren't actually accurate. Right? We do believe that Jesus is God, but we do not believe that the Son is the Father. So we have to be careful with our ises. All right, and then there were some conclusions in paper 1 about those topics. Then when we got to paper 2, exploring the Shema, paper 2 of 3, Yahweh and Yeshua, we again looked at these particular topics. So there's 5 of them on my screen. We got the introduction, is Trinitarianism logically incoherent? We dealt with introducing this idea that is it not possible to speak of God being one yet three yet one, right? Is it logically incoherent? Does it fail in its discussion? And from there we move to segment 2. Let's get a little bit technical. There we kind of introduced a case study on Dr. Dale Tuggy, who is a prominent biblical Unitarian. His theology is similar to ancient dynamic monarchianism, a form of non-Trinitarian monarchianism that was present in the early 1st and 2nd centuries, that believes that Jesus is essentially a human. He's not pre-existent. He's not eternal like God the Father. He's not the Word made flesh. He's just a man that was born into the world. He was especially endowed by God. I like to say he was divinated. I think that's the terminology that shows up in some other religious circles, but he was divinized, as it were. He was glorified by God, and so he deserves to be called God in special circumstances, and he's certainly worthy of worship because God deems it so. And so Dr. Dale rejects Trinity for the simple fact that he believes that Jesus is just a man. So we built a kind of a case study around Dr. Tuggy's biblical Unitarian perspective. Let's get a little bit technical. Was that, is Yeshua God? An appeal to mystery was segment 3. We looked at this idea of Mysterian theology, which is the idea that God is Trinity, but it's mysterious. It's something that was formerly hidden from mankind, but it's now revealed. God knew it all along, but man didn't know it. And that's why we didn't always see Trinity in the earlier parts of our Bible. It's not that God suddenly became Trinity when the incarnation took place, right? That's what Unitarians would want us to believe, want us Trinitarians to believe, is that Trinitarian theology was invented later on. It's a Johnny-come-lately, and therefore Jesus was cataloged and categorized as the second person of the Trinity later on. But all along, God has also always been a monad, a unity, a monotheistic singular God, singular being, one person. But that's not really quite the case. The word mystery in the Greek word mysterion in the Bible doesn't refer to something that is unknown to anyone, like a whodunit novel, a mystery novel. That's not what mystery means. It refers to a truth that is true and confirmed from God's perspective in the heavens, but man simply doesn't realize it yet. It's the idea of progressive revelation. God reveals things as time moves forward, and that's why it's mysterious to us, but it's not mysterious to God. We appeal to mystery because the Bible uses that example in its discussion on God's identity. Is Yeshua God? An appeal to history. We also looked at the church fathers in that section. And then we also looked at Yeshua God, an examination of passages about the Trinity. So if I jump into each one of those, which I've kind of already done the introduction,